Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Kryptonian saying here, bringing you guys another review for Black Clover Chapter 333. And wow, Asta versus Lucius is here, and this fight is starting to live off with all the hype that we were expecting. We are officially on the road to Wizard King Asta, and this is hands down going to be the toughest battle for our favorite little anti-magic knucklehead ever. However, before the battle itself starts off, we had Tabata slowing things down for a little bit in order to add further context to Lucius, his origins, and his motives, as well as the fate of Julius Novachrono. So the chapter opens up with the revelation that Julius was born inside of Lucius, so the two of them, they have two souls inside of the same body. One soul being Lucius and the other soul being Julius Novachrono, the man who we all know and love to be the current Wizard King of the Clover Kingdom. We further learn that despite being forced to share a body with Julius, Lucius was still regarded as being the strongest devil host in the history of the family. We see Lucius looking over at his siblings in the Spade Kingdom, the Dark Triad, Xenon, Dante, and the goddess Vonica, who all men of culture sent for. We then see him inside the temple looking over broken stone tablets, reading over them very intently. We then see the words on the page that I thought a lot about what we are and what we are meant to accomplish. And we as readers also see the text that says the following: follow the supreme devil Astaroth and you will find your answer. We then get another flashback where we see Lucius in conversation with Julius inside of their mind, where Lucius tells him that he's seen the future and he knows what true peace is. When Julius begins to make it known that he intends to stop him, Lucius cuts him off, stating that I know you'll try to stop me, which is ironic because you're the person who's closest towards me, yet you still don't understand. In this very moment, Tabata has now cleared up any confusion that might have still existed about Lucius and Julius's relationship, all while giving us more about Lucius's motives, which we now know are him bringing up that he believes essentially that he's going to bring peace to the world. Everything he's done up to this point was all for that goal. It gives us a reason to pause for a second as readers and go, wait, if he wants world peace, then surely he can't be a bad guy. I mean, the Dark Triad, they weren't the nicest of people, and he did kill Damnatio, but anyone who wants world peace, they can't be a bad person, right? However, it's then that everything shifts back to the present timeline and we get the rug pulled out from underneath us. Regardless as to what his intentions were, Lucius is not a good person. Lucius isn't just bad, but he's bad and he's extremely powerful, and not just in terms of magic, but his mere presence on the screen makes you realize that this is a villain unlike anything we've seen before. Lucius then stops time around the Clover Kingdom, leaving only Asta and Lucius as the only two people who can move and openly converse with one another. Asta in this moment has begun to observe Lucius, realizing that he looks a lot like the Wizard King, but something's not just right. And when he senses the mana and power, he realizes that the power that he's sensing is on a whole different scale, to a point where it's on steroids. And he's like, wait a second, I don't think you're who I think you are. And it's in that moment that Lucius confirms what we saw in the last chapter, which is that he has now absorbed Lucifer by eating the two halves of his heart, which now means we can keep the coffin dance meme for Lucifer, the only villain who managed to make Dante look like a good antagonist. We also learn that Asta's anti-magic is the reason why Lucius could not stop time for him, which is pretty big because that is implying that Asta is being set up as being the main person who can fight against Lucius, just as he was the key factor in being able to fight against Lucifero. We then see that Lucius has taken the stakes a step higher because Asta is realizing that the key that he's sensing has Lucifero inside of it, and Asta begins to freak out and he's openly wondering just who Lucius is. He says, you're the Wizard King, but you're not really the Wizard King. You're human, but you're not really human. Asta wonders where the Wizard King is, which leads to Lucius dropping the bombshell. Julius is now dead. While Asta is stunned, Lucius reveals that Julius was given a mission for their ideals, which was to understand sadness, hatred, the sources of conflict, and to seek to understand all about discrimination, all in the name of being able to attain true peace. Lucius then goes on about destroying humanity and rebuilding it with magic of his siblings, the Dark Triad, so that all humanity can now become equal, with him ruling over humanity as the final Wizard King. He then reveals that he's seen everything and he knows that it's possible and that everything has gone according to his plans, except for the existence of Asta. Asta, a boy who was born without magic is the bane of his plan, the thumbscrew if you will, and Asta has to be addressed in order to make his plan in fruition. And he claims that Asta is a flaw in this world he wants to build. Asta pushes back by stating that the Wizard King is someone who puts his life at stake to save others. He says that the current Wizard King, Julius, wouldn't die so easily, and he'll save Julius from Lucius, going so far as to state that he will surpass the Wizard King. This leads to Lucius revealing something that we have all likely suspected heading into this final arc, even before he ate the 2 parts of Lucifer's heart, which is that Lucius is stronger than Julius, which is essentially telling Asta, so what if you surpass your limits and you become stronger than Julius, your beloved Wizard King? You're still below me in power. Now, as Asta begins breaking that time freezing spell at the end of the chapter and the battle begins to start, we have quite a bit to discuss here. So Lucius pretty much referred to Asta as being a blot on his imperfect world because Asta doesn't have magic. So any equality that could be achieved wouldn't actually exist, because how does someone born without magic live in a society where magic is everything? God, this is such beautiful writing right here. Tabata is pulling the story back to the original conflict of Asta being someone who can't use magic to attain the title of Wizard King in a world where magic is everything. It makes this battle against Lucius, the man who wants to become the final Wizard King, and Asta hold even more stakes, because Lucius is fighting against a boy who wants to do the impossible by becoming a Wizard King, despite the fact that he was born without magic. We are now seeing what happens when somebody like Asta is being used as an agent of change in order to usher in this new era that's coming. For Lucius, Asta acts like a chaos agent because he was an unpredictable factor in his plan, but for Asta, Lucius represents the highest mountain that he needs to climb before he can become the Wizard King and change the wizarding world for the better. Who else is more fit to change the world of the Clover Kingdom, a kingdom that discriminates against those with low magic and people who are poor, than someone who was born with no magic, he grew up poor, and he worked his way up to the highest rank in the Clover Kingdom. Essentially, the two men want the same thing, equality with no discrimination, but they have a different means to achieve their goals, and now the two ideologies, they're clashing. Asta now has to prove that he is the morally just one, and he is the one who has to prove it's right that he belongs to be the next leader of this world. But this is also opening up the door to Lucius being manipulated, because on one hand, it would be easy to have Asta fight and overcome Lucius, but the idea that he is being used isn't the craziest thing to consider, because we did see him looking over at the stone tablets, and it's around that time that he did come to his line of thinking that we see him as he is now. How ironic would it be that someone who's so full of himself and has time magic couldn't see the moment in time where he himself became a pawn to somebody else's chessboard? If we do stick with Lucius as the final villain, what we have now is enough to build towards a proper conclusion to the story, because narratively it fits. Everything's coming full circle, but it just feels like there's one more plot twist that's coming, and we're being treated to this battle of Asta versus Lucius as a bit of a misdirection, in my opinion. How do you guys feel about that? Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? I'm very curious to read your comments down below. While you think that over, consider watching these other videos you see on the screen right now.